Money had come, just as promised. Ozan had it all: mansions in Lekki, luxury cars, and a bank account overflowing with millions. Every morning, he woke up to messages from women begging to see him. Every night, he drank the finest champagne and smoked cigars worth more than some people's yearly salary. But he never slept. Because every time he closed his eyes, Ovi was there, watching. It started as whispers in the dark. At first, Ozan convinced himself it was his imagination. But then, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered in his mansion even when there was no power outage. His phone screen would freeze at random times, displaying Ovi's smiling face, an old picture from when they were still struggling together. At night, his bed shook violently as if something unseen was trying to pull him into the ground. The worst part was the barking. It started 3 nights after he sacrificed Ovi. He woke up drenched in sweat, his throat sore. He didn't know why. But then, the CCTV footage in his bedroom revealed the truth. He had been barking. Like a rabid dog. Woof woof woof. He had been on all fours, scratching at the walls, drool spilling from his mouth. Ozan nearly lost his mind. One night, Ozan sat in his living room, staring at a glass of whiskey on the table. He hadn't touched it. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. His hands shook. His skin felt cold, even though the AC was off. He reached for his phone and dialed Baba Orogun. The ritualist answered on the first ring. "He is here, isn't he?" Ozan's breath hitched. "He won't leave me alone." A long silence. Then, Baba Orogun spoke. "There is only one way to end this. Another sacrifice." Ozan shut his eyes. He had done enough. He had paid his price. Hadn't he? Before he could respond, the lights in his mansion flickered. Then bang! The front door burst open. A cold wind rushed into the house, carrying the scent of decay. The temperature dropped. Ozan's breath came out in white mist. Then he heard it. Woof! His blood ran cold. The sound was coming from his own mouth. His hands moved on their own, curling into claws. His body trembled. His vision blurred. Then, crash! The glass table shattered as an unseen force slammed into him. Ozan screamed as cold, invisible fingers wrapped around his neck, lifting him off the ground. His throat burned. He kicked and struggled, but there was nothing to fight against. Then he saw him. Ovi. Floating above him, eyes hollow, mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. "You took my blood," the spirit whispered. "Now, I take your mind." Ozan's body convulsed. His lips curled. He tried to speak, but woof woof woof. Tears rolled down his face. He was becoming an animal. Morning came. Ozan sat in a dark room, his knees drawn to his chest. His hands twitched. His skin was pale. His mind was slipping. Baba Orogun arrived in his mansion later that day. The old man took one look at Ozan and nodded grimly. "The spirit has claimed you. But there is still a way out." Ozan's voice was hoarse. "What do I do?" The ritualist placed a small black calabash before him. "Drink this before nightfall. It will cleanse you." Ozan grabbed the calabash with trembling hands. But before he could drink, a whisper slithered into his ear. "If you drink that, you die." Ozan's breath hitched. He turned sharply, but there was nothing there. Baba Orogun watched him closely. "Ignore the voice. They don't want to let you go." Ozan swallowed hard. He lifted the calabash to his lips. Bang! A gust of wind slammed the cup from his hands. The calabash shattered on the floor, its dark liquid seeping into the ground. Baba Orogun cursed under his breath. "It's too late." The shadows in the room twisted. The temperature dropped. And then, Ovi appeared. Not as a ghost, but as something worse. His body was covered in black scars. His mouth stretched unnaturally. His fingers were long, sharp. His eyes burned with pure hatred. Ozan scrambled back. His heart pounded in his chest. "Baba, help me," he screamed. The ritualist began chanting, his voice strong, ancient. He lifted his staff. But Ovi was faster. With a flick of his wrist, an invisible force slammed into Baba Orogun, sending him flying across the room. He hit the wall hard, blood spilling from his mouth. Ozan was alone. Ovi grinned. You think you can escape? You think money can buy your way out? Ozan shook his head violently. I didn't want to kill you. The spirit laughed. But you did. The shadows closed in. Cold fingers wrapped around Ozan's throat, dragging him into darkness. And then, everything went black. Ozan woke up in a graveyard. He was lying inside an open coffin. The sky above him was dark, full of swirling clouds. Barber Orogun knelt beside him, his face bruised, his robe stained with blood. You must make a choice, the old man whispered. Give them another soul, or lose yours forever. Ozan's vision blurred. He was so tired then, an image flashed in his mind. Olamide. His last real friend. The one person left who still trusted him. Ozan shut his eyes. He had already taken Ovi's life. Could he really do it again? But then, a chilling whisper. If you don't, we will take your mother instead. Ozan's breath hitched. His mother. The only woman who had ever truly loved him. The woman who had prayed for him when he had nothing. His heart pounded. He had no choice. That night, Ozan invited Olamide to his mansion for a celebration. They drank. They laughed. They reminisced about the past. Then, when Olamide wasn't looking, Ozan struck. A knife to the throat. A gurgle. A body hitting the floor. Blood pooled around Ozan's feet. Then his phone buzzed. A new message. Bank alert, $10 million credited to your account. Ozan's hands trembled. He had won. Hadn't he? Then. A whisper. Ozan, do you remember me? He turned sharply. Olamide's corpse twitched. His lips curled into a slow, blooded smile. His eyes snapped open. And he laughed. Mim 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 mim. I wonder what happened next. Watch out for part 3 and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe.